Thank you for joining us for the very first episode of Hall of Tales, podcasts about LARP. My name is Avram Siegel. With me is my brother Jacob Siegel and our mutual friend Tyler Willis. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves more formally.
Yeah, sure. I'll introduce myself first. What's going on, guys? My name is Jacob Siegel. I'm a brother of the aforementioned Avi Siegel, and yeah, dude, I'm really excited to start talking about LARP because it's something I'm really passionate about. I run my own LARP along with a couple of my really good friends, and I have phenomenal staff. Frontier Dawn in PA. We're up at French Creek. We've run for it's our second year now. I've been LARPing for a couple years before that too. So I'm really I love the hobby, man. I love every part about it. I love the crafting. I love the role playing. So I'm just down to start talking about LARP.
And I am the mentioned Tyler Willis. I LARP with Avi at Chronicles of Roanon. It's a LARP run here in New Jersey. Small LARP, but great LARP. Been LARPing for a few years now, and I'm always interested in sharing and talking about my opinions about it.
And a little bit about myself. I've been LARPing for almost 10 years now. It's getting pretty close. I'm starting to feel like one of the old guard, old fogies in it. I'm usually always just thinking about LARP in my job, wherever I go. I have a couple things on my mind, and I think that this podcast is going to be a good way to start conversations and give a lot of different perspectives about a lot of things that LARPers or people that are thinking about getting into LARP might be thinking about. So I hope that whoever does listen to this has something to take away with and maybe hopefully get into LARP themselves. And I figured the first place to start when you're doing a first episode is where most LARPers start, because we are now getting to the late spring, summer season. So a lot of LARPs, if they were on hiatus, they're starting up again, and there's supposed to be a nice influx of new players. And with new players comes the challenge of creating new characters. A lot of times it's their first character. And so what I wanted to talk about for this first episode is character creation, talking about where you can get inspiration from. I want us all to talk about some of where we draw our own personal inspirations from, favorite characters we've played in the past, and to then talk about things that we feel you should avoid, pitfalls and certain tropes that might have become a little stale. So I think I'd like to start off with Jake first.
So I would like to start by talking about my first LARP character, because I think everyone is kind of like, you go to what you know. And my first LARP character was a basic barbarian dude. I grew up, my father, he used to tell me, and I read books and saw, the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger about Conan. So I wanted to be that, barbaric, strong man dude who'd be like, fuck all odds. I'm out there to conquer the world. So that's the kind of character I wanted to play. And I really didn't put too much thought into, personality, like what I like personality wise, or like how I fit in the world. I'm just like, I want to be this person, I basically want to walk around as Conan. And that was kind of how I based my first character off of. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it, becoming that character. And it was just really cool to immerse myself like that.
You want to say what the character's name was?
Yeah, so the character's name was Grael. And I kind of got that name just by looking up, like, I wanted him to be more like in tune with nature. I think Grael is a name of like a forest warrior, or like, it means like some sort of animals in I can't remember, like Celtic or something. But that's another thing. I didn't really put too much thought into the name. I was more just like wanted to emulate this character, and I think that's like a lot of people do, is they emulate what they know and what they like as their first character. Whether it be like D&D, you're like, I always play the paladin, so my first character is going to be like a paladin, and you kind of put yourself in this box, which can be good and bad. It's a comfort zone thing. So building off of that, the things I enjoyed most about that character weren't really the things I thought I would. I really didn't enjoy being the stoic, quiet, like conquering warrior. Like I felt like I kind of pushed myself outside of talking to other people, and to kind of like box myself in a corner. So I guess we're talking. You brought up LARP failures. I think as a failure on my part was I didn't really look at the lore of the game I went to. And because I didn't I just want to insert myself into their game. I feel like I was like a missing piece of a puzzle that for the wrong, I wasn't fitting in.
I kind of think that's a fairly common mistake among new players, is that, they hear from their friends about this fun thing to do on the weekend, and they just sit down and make a character, don't really invest themselves too much in the lore of the game or what's been going on. So they just show up as this person. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because sometimes that personality develops later on as you progress in the game.
Right.
So I totally understand. I'm culpable of doing that too a few times in my LARP career. But I want to get to Tyler now. If he can tell us about his first character and a little bit about that character.
Of course, my first character was a human subrace from the LARP that we played at. His name was Saeed. He was from the desert region of the world, a city that was well known for assassins. The city itself was protected by assassins, and the character himself was the lone survivor of his family's assassin order. I came up with the character because I was reading through the lore. A lot of the races, as a first-time LARPer, felt like a lot of work put into it, a lot of makeup that I didn't have at the time, and overall did not feel like playing a makeup race. So I tried to limit myself to humans, and out of all the humans, the race I looked at, costuming requirements, tan skin. I had tan skin at the time, so it was a natural choice. Read through the lore, always liked sort of in D&D being the stealthy, sneaky sort of assassin, while at the same time doing some crafting. So, with my friend sort of guiding me about how the situation at the LARP was, I built a assassin alchemist. Figured I could sort of work my way into town, sort of project a different appearance than I actually was. I think the character went well. However, overall, I feel like I jumped around a lot as the character, not sticking to one sort of ideal. But a lot of the time, it also showed as character progression through the story, going from assassin to a sort of warrior, protector of good, and then eventually becoming a demon hunter. I do like the progression that I went, and when I look at the story, I think it makes sense. However, I do think my main mistake was I didn't stick to one personality. I would constantly sort of flop back and forth about how I would do things and how I would interpret things. And for new players, it is obviously tough to sort of lock down on a single personality, and sometimes it can just be too difficult to handle.
Well, you know what? That I'm glad that you said that your character had a lot of progression. I mean, if you pardon the pun, starting as a assassin alchemist and then becoming a righteous demon hunter. That's a hell of a character development arc. But I think that's a lot of something that people face too. That as you go through the character progression, sometimes you lose the initial character that you were, and then you take a look back and you look down the line of where you came from to where you are, and it's at the same time it's cool to reflect on that. But at the same time, you're like, what happened and what changed my character so much to make me go from A to B?
I think that's a really good point that you bring up. But what Tyler said earlier, I think for a new LARPer is really good tips, is he looked at the game. And the first thing I recommend is for someone who's brand new LARPing, go with they have a race that's human. I would go with that. You don't got to worry about buying this expensive makeup or applying this makeup, or it's a lot of pressure you can put on yourself. Like, you can, if you just go with a simple race, and you can buy like sweatpants at any Walmart and some work boots and then like a plain shirt, and there's your costume.
Thank God you said work boots, because I can't handle sneakers.
Yeah, I get that too. But I mean, my point is, if when you look at if you do a little research into the game you're going to, it really does help you out more, because you can do it saves you time. And I feel like you get the most out of your experience when you LARP, because right away you can interact with the world. And new people who see you there will know that, oh, this guy put the effort in. He's into this as much as we are. I'll start. It's kind of like it's a symbiotic thing. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. I feel. So the more research you do into the LARP you're going to, the more that you get out of it. The more that I feel like you won't feel like, oh, I should have done this. If I only I did that before I came here. Now I'm here now, and I wish I had this. I wish I had that. But if especially if you know people who go to the game, like Tyler said, he knew people that already went to the game, and a lot of owners that I know from other games, they're usually very approachable. So if you talk to them like, hey, I've never done this before. Like, what do you think I should do? Or I'm really interested in that. They can really guide you. I think communication is always key. Like, communication and research is like my two number one tips for a new LARPer. Do your due diligence, look at the game, talk to the people.
Now, to get into my own kind of pedigree when it comes to my previous characters, my very first character was at a game called Mystic Realms. Of course, he was human because I just had no interest in doing any kind of makeup race at the time.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, you know what, I'll even say it's not a bad idea to even start that way for your very first LARP.
Oh, yeah, man.
So echoing what you said.
It is usually the cheapest option out of any race, human. You don't have to do any makeup, and a lot of games even have human sub-races with partial makeup or partial effects, which get you that sort of feeling of being a special race, while at the same time saving you time, money, and not having to deal with being a makeup race.
So this character, I just decided, you know, it was my very first LARP. I was like 17. I threw together a costume wearing like some gray BDU pants, this checkered green and black tabard, and actually think I got like a loner sword from the game because I didn't know anything about making buffers at the time. And he was just a box standard human from like the Germanic culture, like a medieval style Germanic culture, and his name was Luther. And the very first thing I did, because I had friends that went there and I knew that they were part of like this guild, this group, they were like a knightly order. That's the very first thing I did was I just want to join that order because they were based out of the country that my character was from. You know, I didn't even come up with any kind of backstory. I was just like a fighter who was looking for a place to belong. So I mean that's fine, and like that's fine to do when you're a brand new player. But you know, going back to what everyone has been kind of saying so far, it's super beneficial to you, and you'll get the most out of your experience is to do all the research beforehand, talk to the game runners, talk to other people that you know are attending the game, and work. I mean, if it's going to make you feel more comfortable, it's okay to have like crossing backstories and stuff like that. Which I don't personally do unless I'm like really close friends with that person and we're going to be coming in around the same time and we link our backstories. But that's just a few things. I think actually later in the discussion we'll definitely list all these different ideas about how we feel it's a good idea to go about coming into a game as a new player. Now to kind of switch gears, I'd like to talk a little bit about coming up with inspiration for these characters. A lot of the times people base their characters off certain archetypes or even just characters, whether they be real or fictional. I mean, I get inspiration from so many other sources, but I'd like to start with my fellows here. So I'm going to start with my brother Jake and see what he uses for his inspiration for characters or NPCs for his game.
So I talked before about my first character I had, Grael. I kind of want to do a carbon copy of Conan. It was basically, I want to be this barbarian dude, lives in the woods, don't need anybody, but he really wouldn't have that many like fleshed out characteristics. And I really didn't feel like I found a place where I belonged in the game. And that was until one of the game owners actually did a scene. In LARPing, they do scenes where they describe a moment or an action. And I saw him come down as one of the gods of the game. And I was so enamored by the way he portrayed this god in the game that I immediately was like, I want to make a character that's on just following that god.
Can you describe the scene a little bit?
Yeah, so basically in the game, there's a martial artist who became ascended to godhood, and he's a very righteous person, and he came down to save others and protect the innocent. And when I saw this as Jacob, not as my character, I saw this scene, I was like, wow, I'm really impressed by what he's doing. I really like the whole setup. He was in monk robes, doing this kung fu, but also very humble at the same time. I really like that character, and so the next event, I ordered monk robes.
Well, and you did a total character change.
I stopped the character 100%, and I looked up. I did my research after that because I'm like, I have to know everything about this god, and I looked up his tenets, how his faith works in the game, like how that god interacts with every part of the lore of that game. And then I based my character off of his tenets. And from there, I developed a personality for my character that felt very organic. And I had a reasoning for all my actions and a clear goal in mind. You know, I was a humble monk who practiced martial arts and defended the weak. And through that, I kind of found my place in the game, all because I was inspired by something that the game creators did themselves. So I feel like I always try to find inspiration in moments like that, where I see something incredible, and it's usually a moment. It's not like a series, but a moment that I find incredible. Let it be from movies or from a book. Usually it's character related though. It has to be like a strong character, or a bad character too, like a very evil character. Something I always am fascinated by is like the crazy berserker, like Bane. I'm always like fascinated by those type of guys who are like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. One minute they're innocent, and the next minute they're like crazed warriors. Like I really like that kind of
Bane, the
mindset.
Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really anytime I see a portrayal of a character that I find fascinating or complicated, I always want to be like, wow, how can I adapt this? How do I adapt that character to make sense in this game, but still fit in the lore?
Okay, Tyler, where are some of those places where you find inspiration? And of course, feel free to say how that's influenced characters for you.
Yeah, of course. A lot of the times, whenever I'm looking at going to a LARP, I'll start off by reading the lore. And usually this is my first step. I'll see if anything in the lore jumps out at me as directly inspirational. As Jake has said, seeing a god just descend and just feeling a sort of inspiration from this kind of character that the LARP has already created. And usually if this doesn't work out, then I'll start falling back on books I've read recently or movies I've seen recently. A lot of the times, in particular, I draw a lot of character inspiration from books. For example, my first character I drew, I can't exactly remember the book series. I drew some stuff from a series called The Ranger's Apprentice, and sort of took just inspirations from various characters that I've read and seen from both that and various other trilogies and book series, and sort of match it with the world's lore. Try to take the best bits to create this coherent person that both plays to my strong suits as a person and my personality, while at the same time fitting with the world's lore.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, a lot most of my characters have almost been entirely sort of created through this, with the exception of a single character. Well, two characters really. One character was just simply created in the world. There was a way in the rules to actually play a classless character, and I was inspired by that to just be a normal person in that world.
You're talking about Bjorn the Farmer.
Bjorn, yeah.
Bjorn
the
Farmer.
Greatest character ever, Bjorn the Farmer.
Yeah, I love that guy.
And the moment he showed up, everyone was confused, and everyone was just shocked at it. And moments like that are usually what I go for.
No, that's very interesting perspective. In my own experience, as far as when I draw inspiration, everyone's going to say things like movies, books they've read, comic books. I think one that kind of gets overlooked as well is music, especially if you're into very thematic music, especially things like power metal or music where they're really telling a story. I think that's a great way to draw inspiration. Or if not, just like the vibe of the music that you're like, man, I can totally see this awesome epic music being the background music to my barbarian ripping the heads off of like fucking 100 orcs or something in a single battle. For my very first character, like I mentioned in the beginning, Luther, he was completely no inspiration, just went right in, nothing, didn't have any kind of plan. My second LARP character, who was kind of like, he was like a wizard warrior hybrid. He was also kind of just like Avi in a LARP, just not really trying to be any specific character from anything or draw inspiration from too many sources. It was really with my third LARP character, the barbarian Arn, where I was like, oh man, I had read these two books by an author named Morgan Llewellyn. One was called Red Branch, about the Celtic hero Cuchulainn, who was a famous berserker, but he was also like a righteous warrior and very honorable. And the second was called Bard, which was about a bard. And I got so much ideas about the concept for like Arn's tribe and the way he does things. He's super honorable, but he's also a crazed warrior when push comes to shove. And with the current character I'm playing, Endymion Brando, it's right in the last name. I took so much inspiration from Dio Brando from the JoJo series, anime series, as well as just like trying to think of like what's the most devious, evil thing I can imagine and not get caught doing.
I think you bring up we're talking about Arn as a character that's really close to me, and talk about inspiration. You can be inspired by not like movies or books, even music, but other people around you. The character Avi's talking about is actually tied into a character that I played in the same game that we kind of came up together. Ulfric, actually, I played his brother in game, and me and Avi usually don't go for the dual backstory thing, but we really like barbarians culture, and just I really wasn't expecting to be like that involved in this character, but then as we started working on it, I was like, wow, I'm really into this. Like I really like this.
Our first meeting in game was so super emotional.
Oh yeah, like we had some of the greatest like moments of just role playing or like fun moments with like be doing stupid barbarian stuff, and I would never expect it to be like inspired or so enthralled by this character that I just came up with like really on the fly. Like we only talked about it a couple of times, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll play him. I'll try him out for a game. And it turned out to be like this 2 year long, like every game we went to, we were like known as the Marson Brothers. We rolled into town, and it was like really cool moment.
We were a known entity in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's a cool for new players too. If you're talking to your friends and you want to do this like dynamic duo type thing, I'm all for that. I think if you got a cool original idea and you guys can play off each other and you work well together, and it's like a comfort thing too. If you're going around new people. I 100% go for that, because I think it really, it shows people that like these people are, they're having fun, they're out there doing something creative, and they're like working together and like as a unit. And I feel like people flock to that. They like that kind of stuff and that creativity.
We were always turned to like 11.
Yeah, well, definitely, because you kind of keep each other in the game,
Mm-hmm.
And if I might jump in, and even it doesn't even have to be with your friends. You can go to this game for the first few events and then suddenly meet people in game. Like with the Sigmarsson brothers, aforementioned, Syad, my first character, became involved with them, and we were a group. We were we were a warrior group in game, and we became one of the most influential groups in the world's game among the players. And this was just from strangers who had met and became friends at LARP.
Mm-hmm. Which is cool too, because we kind of came. I mean, we knew Tyler before this, but because of we interacting at LARP, we became friends outside of LARP too. And that's what's really cool about it. And I actually met my fiance through this too. She, we were in this group, and then she wanted to make a character to be a part of our Sigmarsson clan. And then we got to spend even more time together. And I love how like LARPing. That's my favorite part about LARPing, is you bring these people together that would probably never even be in each other's circle of influence. And because of this one hobby they have in common, LARPing, they get inspired by each other, they work together with each other, you meet new people, you get new experiences.
Actually, Tyler, that brings up the question. I think you're next. I married a girl I met at LARP. Jake's on his way to getting married.
Yeah.
You're next.
That's what we should really say to new players. It's like,
LARP relationships.
Yeah, LARP, if you want to find a really good woman, and you would try out LARPing.
Well, there's the caveat. Actually, fair point. Jake's fiance Brittany just said, don't go to LARP to cruise for babes.
No, definitely not. But LARP's full of a lot of cool people.
Right.
And if you want to meet cool people, I mean, like anywhere, there's good people and there's bad people, but I think the majority of people you meet LARPing are cool people that have the same hobbies that you do. They're like the same people. You're like, wow, you saw that obscure occult sci-fi movie that's from the 70s? I love that movie too. You could talk about it with them, and maybe you can make a character about that. Like you just get this weird inspiration and play off each other.
Okay, so to kind of surmise a little bit, so the main places where it's a good idea to draw from are movies. Movies, TV shows, books. I mentioned music, which I still really think is something that's really overlooked when you're drawing your inspiration. So those are just like the very basic places. Of course, everyone's going to be different. And again, we're not saying don't go in without any inspiration, because there's always room for character development, so you can grow into your own character. But I also think with that, I think people can go too far with inspiration, and it becomes flat out plagiarism.
Oh yeah.
Like if you come into a game and you're like, I'm a traveling warrior who fights monsters. I have white skin and white hair, and I have cat's eyes. Well, obviously you're Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher. So you got to tone it down a little bit and take some inspiration from what maybe Geralt, his personality is and what he does, but you don't just blatantly copy him.
I think the biggest thing is if you're inspired by something very specific, you have to. That's when you really. I stress again. You got to do the research into the game.
Does
and
it
say,
fit?
how can I fit this character into this game? Like maybe I can't be a guy with I could still be a monster hunter, but maybe I can't have the cat's eyes. But then I could still take up his mannerisms. Like I can be this character without being 100% this character and taking his name and everything about him. It's what's why we say inspired. You're inspired by it. If you take from that, but you still create something yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. We're all LARPers. We all draw inspirations from our own ways, and we all love characters from fantasy books and from fantasy stories, games, and movies. But of course, we all realize that we can't actually be that character. We want to be our own character to create our own story, and we can draw from inspiration from these characters and sort of adapt some of their mannerisms, some of their personalities for our own character. But in the end, it's your own character. You want to be unique. You want to be your character. You don't want to be a carbon copy.
What I was going to say was that I also think that, while you think it's clever, while you may think it's clever when you're making your character to really, like 90% rip off this other character, other people are going to notice that, for sure. They're going to be like, dude, you look exactly like Geralt. You act like Geralt. Why would I want to interact at this like sci-fi LARP or whatever with Geralt? I think that you got to give people the credit that they're going to figure out what it is that you've taken a lot of your inspiration from, and because of that, they might not want to interact with that. I've seen personally where, in my experience, where I've seen this with characters, I'm like, this guy is like, okay, you're Jon Snow, like to the T. Why do I want to RP with Jon Snow? I'd rather just go to this other guy who's completely original, RPing his heart out as this brand new character that he's come up with, and it's a more interesting and original story for both of us.
I think the key is you really just have to walk the line of inspiration versus, I guess, take what Avi said earlier, is plagiarism. Like, if you want to have this character that's based off this character, that's great. Like, that's a really great way to start. But the problem is where it's like your backstory is the same, and you even have like other relationships are the same, and it's like, dude, I feel like I'm just using your analogy, Jon Snow. Like, I feel like I'm watching a Game of Thrones episode every time I talk to you. Like, come up with different names, like change stuff about it. Like, the thing is, these are jumping off points. Like, you should jump off from inspiration. It shouldn't be the whole character.
Any comment on what Jake just said, Tyler?
Yeah, and I agree fully. If any conversation with someone is, like Jake said, carbon copied, they're saying exactly what that character said on the last episode of Game of Thrones, it's no fun for anyone. And you're probably not even going to have fun playing that character. You might think it's funny, you might think in the moment you think you're having fun, but then later on you're going to realize my character is pointless. My character has no meaning to it. I don't actually really have an attachment to this character. Like, I love this TV character, and I love that I'm playing that TV character at a LARP, but then it's sort of a hollow connection.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, because even anyone here, if you play a D&D game or even a video game, like, you become invested in the character that any RPG, you become invested in the character that you create. If you're just like the copy of this person, I don't feel like I'm this character. I just feel like I'm just walking around as his avatar in this world. I'm not this guy. I'm not like, it's just I think it's just a level of involvement that you don't get. Like, you don't get to be fully, when you create something yourself, even if you build off inspiration, it becomes like your thing. Like, if you ever made anyone who's created music or art or anything, that's you created that. It's something that's now like a part of you that you created, to use that word again. You get that attachment to it. I feel like if you're just talking about something, then you really don't have that. Like, if you're just copying it, you don't have that creative influence that really has that connection.
Now, as far as it goes with character creation and using inspirations to create that character, I also think that people fall into these what's known as tropes. So, like, my character is the bastard son of a noble whose parents were his adoptive parents were murdered by stormtroopers, and you could just rattle off anything that you can imagine from any other movie. Personally, I think the one that I hate the most is madness for madness's sake. where your character is just randomly crazy with no reason behind it. I mean, there could be a reason why they're mad, but just their actions and things like that just doesn't make any sense. And in fact, I think it actually is to the detriment of the game and the character's involvement interacting with other characters. So that's like madness for madness' sake is one that drives me up a wall. The other one would probably be amnesia.
Yeah.
Amnesia is just like, that is the laziest thing I could think of. It's like, I don't know who I am. Okay, then, then I'm not, you're obviously a crazy person who has some kind of head injury. This is medieval times. I'm going to tell, the police that, this guy needs to go to the nuthatch.
Well, I don't want to go that far, but I definitely understand where you're coming from. It's frustrating that to create a world and to put so much thought, you create these kingdoms, you create these gods, you create these societies and the way these people interact with each other, and have somebody not spend 10 minutes to like go on the website or your Facebook page and read like a paragraph that's about their kingdom or whatever they want to play, and they just come in game like, I don't know anything at all. Like, I don't know. All I have picked was a name, and then that's it.
They might not even know their name.
Yeah, well, exactly. And you feel like you're cheating yourself. That's my biggest problem is you're cheating yourself. Like, if you just spend 10 minutes and do the research and come into game with like, hey, I'm freaking Jon Snow from Winterfell. And my tenets are like truth and honor and justice. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's your guy. Like, you've given yourself your backstory and you've given yourself the way you're going to interact with other people. That's just from 10 minutes of research that you've done for yourself. Instead of showing up and be like, I don't know where I'm from. I don't know who that person is. I don't know what this person does. I mean, the entire game, you're just getting people frustratingly explaining to you about things that people already know. That's common knowledge. And you're cheating yourself from being immersed in the world. Like, you're there to play a character.
I mean, Jake and Tyler, you can weigh in on this individually. I mean, are there any specific tropes aside from what I just mentioned that really drive you up a wall when you're interacting with characters?
I gotta think a second. Do you have any off the top of your head, Tyler?
Yeah. But just to jump back a quick on the amnesia topic, there is a right and there is a wrong way to do amnesia. The wrong way is to simply say, my character has amnesia. I don't know who or what I am. I don't know where I'm from. But there is a right way to do amnesia. Like my current character, for example, Conrad. His amnesia began where my backstory begins. The backstory I wrote starts with him waking up lost, not knowing who he is, not knowing where he was. And then I wrote out my backstory up until the point that I came into game. So that way, I get a sort of use out of the amnesia. My character was a young adult when he woke up. That is a sort of example of doing a right way of amnesia in which, I'm getting to add all this bit from the world of him sort of skipping the opening stages of his amnesia and also sort of becoming part of the world, meeting with people and developing. Whereas instead, the lazy option is a lot of people take is to just say, I don't know where I am, I have amnesia. No,
that's actually really good. I know obviously I know your backstory because we're highly connected in game, but from that perspective, the right and wrong way of doing amnesia, because you didn't come into game like completely ignorant of the gods, the religion, and anything, so it's just all backstory stuff for you. Like, oh yeah, he had amnesia, but he kind of started to develop in his backstory, and he comes in the game like a perfectly functional member of the in-game society. But being the ignorant guy that runs around asking all the questions and swinging around like a two-handed sword, well, it's like I'm gonna be hard pressed every time you have a question about something that I take for granted that everyone knows to really want to interact with you because I kind of feel like you're clueless about this.
To summarize this, all tropes have a right and wrong way to do it. The wrong way is to always be lazy and just simply take the most cut and dry version of, I have amnesia. I am an honor-bound warrior. I am the exemplar of justice. I am mad. Where the right way is to take that base idea and develop it, incorporate it into this world, and make it unique in this case. And that's what drives me insane. When I see tropes that are just simply cut and paste, cut and dry. You've put no thought into it, and there's no uniqueness to it. I don't mind tropes, and there's only a few tropes I dislike. the main trope I dislike being the annoying character. Being
Please explain.
the childish, annoying character or the jokester, prankster character. For me, yes, I like having fun at LARP, but the jokes and the pranks sort of get me out of the mood. Sort of change my mindset and sort of shift how I'm looking at things. And make it a lot harder for me to stay in character when someone's dancing around me, throwing stuff at me.
No, that's a good one. That's a very good trope that I'm sure people would like to know, that people might interact with you in a certain way if you decide to bring in a character like that, who's nothing but jokes and wants to be annoying for annoyance's sake.
I guess if I had to say, if we're talking about tropes, things that bother me is I don't like when I see a game setting and people, or maybe a one character where you have someone who's, let's say the average lifespan's 100 years, and then someone comes in and they're like, "Hi, I'm 2,000 years old," and you interact with people that are 100 years old, and they're like walking around like, "Oh, I'm like, you foolish children," and like they're playing this like arrogant person, and it's just so, for me, it takes me so out of game to think about, like, if this person's 2,000 years old and I'm 100 years old, like, how can like the level of knowledge that these people would have of life experience would be so vastly different. It's like two different levels of being.
Why would they just be a dick to you?
Yeah, like, oh yeah, I don't think it's just so preposterous, to be honest. Like, why, unless you're like some like higher level plane person, but if you're just like a two normal people walking around, like, you created your character just like I created my character. Like, why you like, even like 300 years old, the average person lives like 80 years old. Like, you have all this super wealth of knowledge but you really don't. You're still like a level 1 character like I am. But it's weird because, like, yeah, I'm 80 years old, but I'm as weak as this like 20-year-old character. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, like, how you can be this so much older than somebody, but also be starting at square one. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Honestly, when you say it like that, it makes me think of a Highlander,
right?
Like the Immortals, because they look the same forever, for whatever age they die. So they could be as cocky as they were when they died, but they could be 400 years old.
Well, I'm talking about more where it's, for me, it's like, if I'm a human person, I'm like 25 years old. My character's 25 years old, and you come in as a dwarf who's 200 years old. Yeah, and dwarves can live to 500 years old, let's say, in the game. Like, how are you 200 years old and I'm 25 years old, but we both have the equal level of skill?
Okay, I think I understand what you're
saying. Like, you have 200 years of life that you've lived.
You would be so much more knowledgeable and wise.
Yeah. That's such a stupid thing that bugs me. But because sometimes you think about, it's a LARP. You shouldn't be thinking about things realistically. But that bothers me, especially when people play it like that. Like, and the thing, people will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm 200 years old, but I don't know how to like make a sword or something like that." Like, if they're a simple smith, and I'm like, "Dude, like, you made the character like that, man."
No, that's pretty valid. I can see that where you're coming from. I just thought of another one because I had to deal with this character at a game I used to play. I kind of don't think it's a good idea to bring in a character that is mute.
That's tough.
I really don't think you should, especially as a new LARPer, I don't recommend you play a character that is blind, deaf, or mute. Not just to mention the physical limitations, but to because let's say you're an able-bodied person who is trying to portray someone who is deaf, blind, or mute. It is incredibly difficult to do it proper justice to someone who actually has that disability. But then in game, it's just incredibly frustrating when you're trying to talk to someone and all they can do is like scribble out what they're trying to say. So like, they're perfectly literate, they just can't speak. And so now our conversation that would take all of 10 minutes takes half an hour.
I agree with you, Avi. Playing one of those characters as a starting LARPer is perhaps the hardest challenge. I did actually play briefly a character who could only utter like one word in a few sentences, and for the most part was just so, because of trauma, could not speak, and it was a challenging role to play. I could play it, but it just takes a lot of extra effort, and like you said, it makes interactions that might be simply put as, "Oh, look out, flying dragon's coming," and I have to try to utter out like, "What is a flying dragon?"
Yeah, you have to pantomime that to someone.
I have to try to get information of when is it coming, where's it coming from. And it just makes it overall harder for you to immerse yourself in the world and sort of build connections with people.
But you know what? I did see this trope done pretty well, because if you remember from Figland, the character Stone,
Yes.
because he didn't speak. He communicated in pantomiming and clicks and whistles.
He was really good.
But he was very, very good about getting the point across. And he was a member of kind of our group for a while. And I'm like, I could basically understand everything he was trying to tell me just by the way he communicated.
And that's what I was going to bring up when you said this trope. And kind of like any trope we're really talking about, I think Tyler said it best, where we say they're tropes, but they can be done right. Like, you can play a character who's super old, but has, like, reasons why he's, like, starting over again in life. Like, those are things, like, or you can play a character who's, like, has an impairment, but, like, because does it really well and seems like in game, and it makes you more immersed because you're, like, dealing with it. And it can actually have some cool roleplay elements to it. My best friend, his first love character he ever made had multiple personalities, had 2 personalities, and that was his first love character he ever had was this multiple personality character, and he did it really well.
That's a tough one to do.
He did it really well. He had 2 different voices and different mannerisms, and not even everyone knew he had these multiple personalities. It's only like under certain circumstances they would come out. He did a really good job, and it's super ambitious, and I applaud him so much for doing that.
Oh, that reminds me. You know what's another hard one?
What's that?
Let's the alter ego. So let's say you have a character who is by day is one character, but by night they have
Batman.
Yeah,
like Batman complex.
Yeah, like a Batman kind of thing. Not aside from the in game, it's obvious where like that guy sounds the same, has the same build, body type as the other character. It's not like take off my glasses, I'm Superman, put my glasses on, I'm Clark Kent.
Right.
It's got to be like next level, 100% difference night and day between these 2 characters to do it well.
Yeah, I think where we talk about is like how it's almost like a conversation of how do you rogue? Are you the rogue that everyone knows? Like, look at that guy, he's a rogue.
He's a known thief.
He's a known thief. Are you the kind of guy that's like, oh, you can't blame Clark Kent. He's just a simple, he's a simple guy, and then really he's like runs the assassin guild type of thing. That is really tough to play, and it's kind of like I was talking about earlier, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of thing, where it's like you show one face, but inside you have this other monster or other personality persona, and I mean. That's a really cool and ambitious thing to want to do, and like I applaud people who want to do it.
As a first-time LARPer, though,
it's really tough.
Even for an experienced LARPer, it's tough. The hardest part of the challenge, managing, instead of playing one character, you're essentially playing 2 characters off of one character sheet, and it can be really tough. Like I'm having a conversation with Avi, and Avi knows that I am in secret the mastermind behind the secret organization seeking to overthrow the crown. But Jake walks up, and Jake knows nothing. In fact, Jake is a loyal servant of the crown, someone I don't want to find out anything about this. I now have to, mid-conversation, switch to a separate personality and hope that Avi picks up on this fact.
It's like in Chronicles of Roanoke. There's the class known as the Spy, where you can create these alter egos, and I've seen it done once, and where I was completely fooled. I was so fooled, in fact, that I thought the character that this one player was playing was an NPC. His voice was different, his actions were different, and just everything about him was different. Like and the outfit, of course. And I'm just like, I know that this is this player. And he's using skills that, there's a little bit of blend that I've seen that character use, but I'm like, this guy's an NPC. He's leading us around. He's telling us what to do. And then at a game, I found out, I'm like, are you kidding me? You were a player. You were this character. That was you the whole time. That was your player character as this guy. And I was completely blown away.
If we're talking about this, then we got to talk about something that's really important that new players should be aware of.
What's that?
If you're going to play a roguey type sneaky character, you have to be prepared mentally for the repercussions of getting caught as a rogue. From stealing if your game allows you to steal from other players, or you do sneaky things, if you're a new player and like in your mind you're like, yeah, I'm a member of the Dark Brotherhood in Skyrim, like I kill people all the time, like for assassin missions, like that's the kind of character I want to play in this game. And like you are that type of character, but then all of a sudden, you get caught or something happens, and all of a sudden you have 20 to 25 people that are angry, like in game, because your character tried to do something nefarious that can be really intense, man. That could like very overwhelming. You have to really prepare for the likelihood of being captured or like your plans being overthrown, and then like being prepared. How will that happen in game? What will the outcome be? You know, I could have a potentially horrible weekend because of my actions. I mean, whose fault is that really? You know, who's like, is that, you know, if I'm going to do something and people are going to react in a natural way through their RP, you just got to be ready for that. And I think as a new player, that's something a lot of people aren't ready for, is like the real like emotional toll of like 20 angry people getting in your face and yelling at them because they did something like, oh, steal, or like, you know, something nefarious.
To add on to that,
I agree.
It also can, for most players, take away from the joy of LARPing. Like, obviously, whenever you do something at LARP, like you're a warrior and you manage to land the killing blow on the mod boss. Wow, that's something you can brag about, and that's something you as a warrior are going to brag about most likely. You're like, I defeated this person, and you're spreading your glory. But for this sort of alter ego character, let's say your secret alter ego achieves one of their goals of getting someone to align with you. Well, I can't go around and brag about that. I can't go around and sort of, you know, the only person who really will know about this is me and whoever was involved, which as an alter ego character is usually the fewer amount of characters. And it's sort of hard for a new character and a new player entirely to play this sort of role where no one knows what you've done. No one sees what you do. You can't tell people what you've done because that would spoil your secrets. And it sort of makes you feel isolated.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You know what? In taking in both of what you guys just said, I think as a new player, when you're coming into a LARP, you need to understand that this is a living, breathing, growing world. Who everyone's actions, if the game is being run well, will have an outcome for the positive or the negative.
That's why it's called live action.
Right. Everything is happening in the moment. So you need to be prepared and understand that, you know, if you get caught stealing or assassinating someone, then you stand a very good chance of facing justice. And when you're confronted, if you don't have the gumption or the thick skin to handle that interaction, then I've seen it happen several times where that person literally out of game has a breakdown.
I don't know. No one wants to see that.
Yeah, it takes everyone out of the moment. It becomes very fast a low light of the event when that happens. So I just think that I'm not telling anyone how to really start a character or play the character that they want to play, but there's nothing wrong with coming to the game and being a box standard warrior who has a decent backstory. And you know, let yourself become accustomed to the rule set. Let yourself become accustomed to the world. Play for a while. Understand what it is to RP. Understand what it is to become a mover and shaker in the world, and then kind of branch out into these other things. Because I bet you, if you talk to a lot of people, their very first character was a guy with a sword. That was that's as standard as it could get.
And if there's something to take away from our conversation about tropes, if you are going to sort of stray from our advice and play one of the harder tropes for a new character, like we brought up the alter ego, then the best thing you can do is be prepared. Do research in literature, in novels, movies, and even with LARPs about the role that you want to play. Try to think of every scenario and prepare yourself to take on this role. That way, if you have someone in your face screaming because you were caught stealing their sword, you're ready for that, and you know that that's your character. You know that that is the reason why your character exists, to steal stuff, and you just happen to be caught this one time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Tyler, and that's also obvious a good point. And I think the biggest thing that for a new player to take away from this would just be that, you know, please do your research and it's for your benefit, like, and play the character that you're going to have fun playing that moment. That's what I would always say. and that could be someone who's just like you. Like I'm just playing Jacob in this world. Like I'm same personality as I have if I'm walking down the street, going to Wawa, get a coffee. It's the same personality my guy has, like killing orcs. Like I'm just like, hey, I'm just like, I'm my character. Like that's perfectly fine if you just come up with a generic backstory and you do a little bit of research and you show up in the world and I'm basically the same type of person. You don't have to be anything like fantastic. It's just all about what do I have fun doing this weekend? Like, will I have fun like pushing myself and putting myself in intense situations, or do I want to be laid back and kind of just go with the flow, or do I want to be like heavily sneaking around and like being devious? What do you want to do to kind of like have that escapism from? That's why we all go to LARP. We go to LARP because it's fun. We have a good time. We meet people, but it's also like it's like our life away from our work life or whatever we have else going on. Like for those 2 or 3 days, you get to be this character. And sometimes you don't want to be another character. You just want to be yourself and just hang around with people, but still be in the game. Like that's fine too.
Well, only take upon yourself what you fully believe that you have the capacity to handle.
Yeah, definitely.
So you really, I think it's so weird talking about a game, but because it's a really social interaction and community-based thing, you need to understand yourself a lot as you're going to become involved in this. Because, of course, when you're creating a LARP character, you understand that you're taking on a role, but you know what? If this were a movie and that's a role, you're the director. So the character may be doing one thing, but ultimately the decisions rest with the player.
I think another kind of what you just said reminded me that when you're in you're meeting these people for the first time, and when you're a new player, and you're meeting a community of people that they could all know each other for like over 10 years. And this is the first time they're meeting you. And if you want to play a character who's a thief, let's say, or a mad person, that's their first interaction they're having with you as a person. And I know they should be like, oh, I'm the character, I'm not the person, but there's a bleed effect. People are going to be like, yeah, I don't know if this guy is really like that in real life. Like you might create this distance from other people.
This guy was an obnoxious dick.
Yeah, you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that guy. And I mean, I shouldn't say you don't want to be that guy. Some people want to yeah, I'm gonna go and be like antagonistic. I'm like, that's cool too, man. If that's like people like to have that dichotomy when they go to games, but just be prepared to be like face the repercussions of your actions. Like be prepared to reap what you sow, basically.
And you actually brought up something, Jake, that I'd like to talk about more. You brought out that you're coming to a community. These people could have known each other for a long time. And for a lot of people, this can be intimidating. I know when I first came to Chronicles of Roanoke, I knew no one, and everyone knew each other for quite some time and knew previously from the previous game. And this is quite intimidating and can throw off a lot of people. Suddenly, you're a bit shaky with your roleplay because you're talking to someone who knows the lore for 100%. And you're afraid to mess something up. You say one wrong thing and you look like an amateur. You look like you did no research whatsoever. But it's important to realize that, hey, this is your first time with this community. Each event, each time you go back, it's going to get better. And hey, by the end of even your first event, you might have already made friends in that community.
Yep.
What are your opinions on this?
No, I think you're absolutely right. First impressions are everything. It's a shame to say that, as we try to find our escapism in going to LARPs, real life still has an effect on that. So as you're meeting people for the first time, the first impression that you give will last with you. I think that's why for a very long time I kind of stuck with characters that were more or less good guys. Because coming in game as a guy who's antagonistic, or is a thief, or is outright evil, and is just a slayer of people is it can be pretty tough because these people don't know you. They realize that you're coming in as this guy who is a wanton murderer. It might not go well for you. So for a long time I was just playing good guys, and it's only now that I decided that I want to see how the other half lives with my current character, and I'm like, I want to be unabashedly evil, but do it on the sly. And just see how that goes, because I'm comfortable in that community by this point. So again, I think it's not a sign of weakness to come in as a character that is an overall good person.
So what I want to say about this topic, I want to talk about when I really don't PC anymore now that I'm part of Front 2 Dawn. I work with this amazing staff around this game. So my initial reactions meeting someone new as a PC versus now as a staff member is completely different. So as a PC, the first time I meet you as your character, I'm basing you as a person off of the character I meet you. Like, even though you really shouldn't, because they're playing a character. It's the first time I've ever met this person in my life. So if I meet them as whoever they are, I'm like, wow, maybe this guy's really like that. And like, if I don't really talk to them outside of the game, that's the only interaction I have with them is as a PC to PC as their character. Of course, I'm going to think that's how they are all the time.
Do you have an example of when that can happen?
A perfect example is a character who plays a rogue. And they do like these sneaky nefarious stuff, and like they spread rumors and like talk to other players. Try to like create this like adversarial type of thing around other players. Like, that's their character. Like, they're playing both sides. I don't know if like, man, is this person really like a manipulative person outside of like, is that like what they do? No, do they spread rumors? Like, you don't know if that's how that person is in the game, or is that how they are in like real life? And then, but now as a staff member working on Frontier Dawn, I get to meet people outside of their characters. So the first time I meet them, I'm like, hey, what's up, man? I'm Tom. Oh, hey, Tom, what's up? I'm Jacob. I run Frontier Dawn. And then I get to talk to them about their character. So I'm meeting them now as a person to person, not as like player to player. It's a completely different way to meet. Like, I'm meeting them like someone I would meet off the street. And then like then we talk about the hobby we have in LARPing. And that's why like I would stress that when you go to a game and it's your first game, you should talk to a staff member and just introduce yourself. Shake their hand, let them look at your face, know who you are. Because if they're like, oh yeah, if someone comes up, another player comes up to them later and says, hey, do you know this new guy Jake? Like, what's his deal? They're like, oh yeah, I talked to him. He's a cool guy. And they're like, oh, he's cool. Okay, fine. Like, just because you have the interaction,
he killed me and stole my money.
Yeah, but because you have the interaction with staff, he's, oh yeah, Jake's a cool guy. Don't worry about him. It's just the character. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. I really think that talking with staff and introducing yourself and like kind of immersing yourself with like the head of the community, which is usually staff for LARP, and it can be any number of staff, like one or two people or just whoever, just talking to somebody, putting a face to the name, introducing yourself, like telling them a little bit about your backstory. That's the fastest way to get like the community behind you.
And games worth their salt, the head of the games or the managers of whatever department should be reaching out to their players, noticing new players and introducing themselves and, making sure that everything is copacetic.
Of course, yeah, 100%.
And to jump off where you started, Jake, as a new player coming to a community, it's always great advice that I think you should show up early. Don't be the character who's showing up. It's going to start at 10, and sign-ups start at 9. Don't show up at 9. Don't show up at 10. You want to show up early. You want to get there when they're setting up. Give a hand. That way you can talk to them, get to know them, and you get to sort of present your out-of-game appearance first before you sort of present this, I'm a mad, cackling murderer who just killed you. I took all your money and I stole your out-of-game items.
That is great advice, Tyler.
That is really good. That's some sage advice coming from Tyler. Like, setting, especially as someone who runs a game, like, so when someone shows up, it's like, hey man, what can I do to help? And they help you set up. Like, immediately I'm like, wow, this is a good guy. Like, this is just a solid person that shows up and wants to help out. He wants to be involved in the community. He wants the game to go well. Even if they like don't really know anything about the game, but they're just like that kind of energy they bring forward. It can really put a positive spin on meeting this new person. And first encounters are everything.
And what about you, Avi? Any advice for people coming in to try to break their way into the communities?
I don't think I would say anything that hasn't already been covered. Introducing yourself to staff, pitching in where you can, when you can, arriving early. I think it's kind of a good way to kind of segue now into your very first costume.
Oh man.
I think that's a good place to pick that whole can of worms up now, because recently, as I've been trying to go to LARPs, I've always made my best attempt to have the most amazing costume that I feasibly could manage at the time. When I went to Jake's game Frontier Dawn, I pulled out all the stops that I could to make myself have the appearance of the character that I wanted to be. I had a hat, a really cool hat with plumes, a very frilly shirt because I was from my character was from a land that's based off of like Renaissance Spain and Italy. So I was doing my very best to fit the part. and then another game I went to where I played like a street punk. I had like bandanas all over myself, a leather jacket. I fought with a baseball bat. That I had a custom boffer made for me. So I think a lot of times it's not a bad thing as a new player to show up with the sweatpants, the hiking boots. But there is a point where you have to say like, okay, an attempt should be made because this is an interactive experience for not only yourself but for everyone around you. So they are going to look you up and down, see your race, your in-game race, I should say, your in-game race and the outfit that you're wearing, and make a judgment on that. So right away, if I see you wearing sneakers, even if it's like your first event, I'm kind of gonna judge about it.
I hope you don't mind, Tyler, but I want to start off by saying, Avi, your costume looked really great when you went to Frontier Dawn, but you also almost gave yourself heat stroke because you're wearing so much costume in the middle of spring.
That is totally fair.
Important thing to note, Avi will put costume over personal health, has a history of getting heat stroke from his costumes.
I like to look as good as I can, even if it costs me my life.
Yeah, he looks great right to the grave. So please wear costuming that's appropriate for the weather is my first advice. Like, do not be the guy wearing plate all through the 90-degree event.
Ignore that. You'll look cool as fuck.
But I'm glad you brought this up because this is something as a new player, and one of my favorite parts about LARPing is crafting. I love crafting, creating anything that I get inspired to make, armor, weapons, anything for NPCs, for monster rigs or props. I love crafting, and it's really not something I thought I would enjoy going into LARP, but it's probably arguably my favorite part about LARPing. When I'm in my first character I had, I basically had like a green tabard and just a brown like fur mantle with a hood that I wore. But what I made was the shield out of an old circular sled that I had, and I put like a belt through it, and I lined the outside with foam, and I fell in love with making that shield. And that really got me entrenched in the hobby of like, how do I up my costuming? And it wasn't so much like I want to look good. I was like, what can I make? Like, how far can I push the envelope of what to make? And I started making foam armor. I started making, boffers. I started, going anything I could think about to make. I started making. And I think for me, it's less about how like your appearance of your costume versus how much effort you put into it. Like, if you want to be the guy who spends $2,000 or $3,000 and buys like a replica armor off of like Dark Knight Armory that's like an exact replica of some like character from World of Warcraft, that's cool, man. Like, that's really nice. But I personally like it better when the guy buys the EVA foam, cuts it up, shapes the armor, and like makes it himself. Like, they spend hours making this armor, painting it, shaping it, dremeling it, and like they put it on and they're like, yeah, I made this for my character. And like, and you get to show it off to people. And it also gets you involved with the community, man. Like, I see that armor. Avi comes up. I'm like, dude, how'd you make that armor? What'd you do here? Oh, I've done that before. Next time you should try doing this. I've had so many conversations like that with people, and we just talk for hours about other LARPing techniques for creating armor and costuming. So for new players, I always say there's no problem with doing the sweatpants and like the plain V-neck type of outfit. But I say, if you want to attempt to craft something, go for it. Even if it doesn't turn out great, you're not 100% happy with it,
you'll learn.
Wear it to the event, you'll learn from it. People will give you advice about it, and they're also everyone's going to be impressed. They're going to be like, wow, man, you tried that your first time? That's awesome. And they'll talk to you about it. It's another way to get really involved in the community. So I love costuming, especially when it involves crafting.
Yeah, I think 9 times out of 10, when I'm looking for a conversation in game or even out of game, I'll always go for the people who sort of put their own effort into making their own costumes over someone who just spends the $1,000 to get the perfectly made replica shirt instead of putting any effort into their costuming, and sort of then goes about to brag about their costume. The people who put their own effort into making their own costume, more times out of 10, there's personal attachment to that costume. You made that. I have personal attachment to some costume I've made. A fur cloak I made. I love that thing. White robes that I had for my desert traveler. Those were pretty cool.
They turned out well.
And it sort of helps you really connect with your character because you're making it uniquely for your character most of the time.
I 100% agree. And that's the thing as well, though. I just think that especially in today's age where you have access to tons of tutorials online and stuff like that, and if you're gonna, it is different if you're going to be going by yourself as someone who wasn't introduced to the hobby from friends that are already involved in it, so they can't really give you tips or anything like that. I think it as well as doing the research of the game, learning its lore and rules, it also behooves you to go online and see, like, how can I make a Renaissance shirt for super cheap, or how can I mod a pair of sweatpants into like peasant's pants, or even make like even if you can't if you don't have hiking boots, how can you make some decent boot covers to get to cover up your chucks or whatever. So I think it's okay to take a little bit of effort and time upon yourself to come into the game with a costume that is passable.
Well, I think when you use the word passable, it kind of sounds very.
I'm not trying to be super. I am somewhat of an elitist with costuming because I fully believe LARP needs costuming. To make that's also a part of what makes it LARP.
I think it needs effort. I think it's all about effort. If you put effort into your costuming, and you're like, I'm not really happy with the way it turned out, but like I spent hours on this, I'm like, dude, it looks great. You put this effort in. The next time you do this, it's gonna be even better. And I just like that you spent the time and your money to build this for your hobby. Like I think that's great. And I don't think there's anything wrong with buying something cool too, because some people, they work. I put in this extra overtime this week. I made the money because I really just wanted to get this cool like latex sword. I had to get this cool latex sword. It's like a fire sword for my character. It fits so well. I think that's cool too, man. Like it's not just with crafting. I think anything that you put effort into, getting or creating, it just means so much to your character. Just like Tyler said, like you're gonna be so much more enthralled with the hobby and be happier with yourself to be like, yeah, like I made this, or like, yeah, man, I worked so hard for this item, for this thing. It doesn't have to be like a whole costume. It can just be bit by bit. Every event, your costume gets a little bit better. I love seeing, like, I show people all the time the pictures of like, this is when you started LARPing. This is for like your level 1 character, you're level 10. Look at the costume difference, man. Like you built this character up, not only in game leveling up, but also your costuming wise has grown too. Like, it's great to come in game when you have the costuming all at once. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think building your costume over time, it's like a physical way to see how the character has grown.
That makes me wish that. I'm sorry, Tyler, go on.
One of the most challenging things for a new player is getting costuming. Like, you look at a lot of other players, they have a large wardrobe of costuming. One of the most important tips you can see is for things like pants and things like vests, belts, and other accessories, and even shirts, get stuff that can be used for general use for any type of character that can then be sort of added on. Don't get a shirt with a specific emblem that is specific to only a particular character and you can only use this shirt for that character, because then if you're paying money for it, let's say you're paying $60 for that shirt, that shirt's only useful for that character. And then you're looking at your wardrobe for a game you want to go to. You have that shirt and you have 2 pairs of pants and boots. All right, now I have to get a shirt for this new game because I have this shirt that can only be used for this character.
So what you're saying is, if you're going to buy your clothing, buy things that are genre appropriate but general.
Well, start out building your general wardrobe. Yeah. Once you've developed your character and all right, I'm locked into this character, then you can start getting unique things for that character, such as a coat with a particular symbol on the back, or a ring, or a necklace. But always start out by getting general costuming. That way, if you decide you don't like the character, or you decide you don't like that LARP, you want to go to a different LARP, you can use this costuming for that. You're not locked into just that role. The
devil is definitely in the details. So even if you have clothing in your wardrobe that is super generic, it's the little things like the rings or the scarves or the pouches that are going to be like, yeah, I know he was wearing that shirt at this game, but he's wearing that ring and that necklace, so it's definitely that character. Mm-hmm. So having little knickknacks and stuff on top of your general clothing to set yourself apart is also a pretty good idea. And they can be conversation pieces too if you're wearing like a holy symbol of your deity and you wear it around openly and proudly, so people could be like, "Hey, man, you're wearing the emblem of the sun god. What's that about?"
So to sort of follow with this conversation, as a starting new player, Avi or Jake, where would you start with your costume? How do you go about as a new LARPer? How do you go about your costuming?
Well, I would start with I would start from the ground up. Comfortable boots, for sure. I mean, they could be like it doesn't really matter their design so long as they're like brown or black. You don't want. I mean, I guess even like Tim's are okay, but as long as they're going to be comfortable for you. And then I would get like a nice pair of rugged pants. So like and I'm trying to stay in the genre. So if you're going to be in sci-fi, like military style pants, BDUs, that's okay. If you're going to be fantasy, maybe some sweatpants that you rough up or sew on patches to them to kind of show that they're weathered. And then like a peasant kind of shirt, so like a laced up shirt, whatever color, doesn't really matter. And I think that's and a belt because you're gonna at least want something to stow your weapons on or in, and I think that'd be the decent place to start. And then from there, you add on like your capes, your hats, your pouches, etc.
So I'm going to bring up two things that Avi didn't bring up. I love everything else he said, but these two things are very important.
Underwear?
Yeah, of course, underwear. But no, seriously, it's what time of year am I planning on LARPing? That is a big factor in my costuming. If I'm going in the middle of December, my first thing is make sure you have your thermals underneath your costuming. You want to have thermals on. Like make sure you bring gloves and wool socks. Yeah, and get your underlayer figured out first. And on the other side, if you're going in 9-degree weather, it's like, hey, get that really like loose fit, shirt. You want to go a size up so you're not like clinging sweat to you. Everything else you said, I would agree, but I would always consider what's the weather I'm going to be LARPing in going to be like, because that's what's going to affect you the most. So you want to look great. I know Avi, Mr. Sunstroke King, but you always want to be safe.
I've also gone completely shirtless.
Well, also a bad move. Don't do that.
Don't be like me.
Yeah,
you'll never be like me, but don't be like me.
Be safe, be comfortable, pack, figure out your clothing for the weekend you're going to have. And the next thing you kind of mentioned is what's your fighting style going to be? If I'm going to be a sword and board guy, like get a belt that I can have my sword in, and maybe a rigging for my shield on my back. If I'm going to use like a firearm in a sci-fi game, get a belt and like make yourself like a holster or a sling that you can have around your shoulder. Figure how am I going to like carry around this item with me all day? I have to have these weapons with me all the time. So how am I physically going to do that without having to walk around with my sword out all the time?
Item cards fit in your pocket, but phys reps you have to figure out how you're going to walk around with.
Exactly.
And
so
oh, sorry, Jake.
That's okay, Tyler. What were you gonna say?
Another important thing to look at is the lore. You want to look at your race and your culture that you're coming from. For example, to use my first character, the race was a human group from the desert, and the culture I came from, they were desert people. So I went for sort of classical style of lighter colors, a few layers and things that would be worn when traveling through hot weather. Various add-ons to make it look like the desert appearance. So you always want to take in the lore to consider things.
That's a really good point, Tyler. I guess the last thing I want to say in the subject is I would always say, be prepared for generic. Like I would say, like peasant pants and a V-neck, inside out, or like a loose shirt is perfectly fine for what you could wear. But I would always recommend having that wow factor. You know what I mean? Having something that people see, like, oh yeah, I see what you're going on. Like, wow, like look at that shield, man. That shield looks really cool. And like, yeah, I spent extra time making this shield. Or it can be like, yeah, I spent all my money and I bought this really cool phys rep. Or like, oh, I got this like really fancy vest. Have one wow factor about your character that you can bring in the game that like you're like happy to show off, because you'll be like, yeah, I'm kind of generic here and there, but I got this really cool weapon or this really cool vest, or like I did cover for my boots. I feel like giving yourself that wow factor is not only like people enjoy seeing that, but it's also like a mental boost for you.
Oh yeah, when people comment saying, "Hey man, that looks awesome as hell," then you're just
That
like, "Man, I did a great job with my costume." And you know what? It doesn't have to be like the way you style your hair or your facial hair or even the makeup you do. You know, you can go the extra mile there too.
Yeah, that can definitely be your wow factor. I would just say you definitely should have something where you're just like, I go all out to the nines at this one aspect of my costume, and then people, I mean, you will feel better about it. People will like it. You know, other people in the community will be like, wow, look at this guy. Like, he is like a really cool sword, or like his makeup's really on point. Wow, you really spent time to get that stuff done.
That's actually really great advice. As a character, when you're doing your costuming, for new players, it might be easy to focus on have a lot of generic stuff, but focus on one big aspect that you want to do with your costume for that character. If you're a makeup race, it might be best to sort of really go for the wow factor through your makeup. Try to do something unique using your race's makeup. Or perhaps you want to sort of play off a particular part of your culture and really exemplify this through, say, a shoulder cape that a lot of people from that culture wear. Or maybe you want to exemplify your class, what you play. You're a paladin, have some really nice and intricate armor for your character, and everything else can really be generic if you sort of really put time and like show off through one aspect, and it can be a lot easier to manage.
Definitely.
Now, since Jake made the mention of, I started and then he kind of expanded on it, weaponry. I guess it kind of breaks down into two sections. One, for someone who's starting a LARP for the first time, what do you feel would be the easiest method of them participating in combat? And two, it's the debate over boffer, latex, or foam. The foam being like Calamisol or other foam injected stuff.
Okay.
So to take it off, to start with, what do you think would be the best starting place for a brand new player that's going to be playing a combat type of character to go with?
I will always say that the best point to start off with is a single one-handed weapon, axe or sword, hammer, and a shield. The reason being is you get a mixture of offense and defense, perfect symmetry. That you know if you're kind of like, if you're not aggressive, you know, you can kind of hide behind your shield. And then when you build more confidence throughout the event, you can start going more with your one-handed sword. You know, but you always have that shield with you to kind of like hide behind, and like because you're so not used to this kind of like fighting, like how hard people fight or how how fast the combat is. You know, you have the shield and sword kind of get you into the game better. And I mean, personally, I also feel like sword and LARP community, we call it sword and board, is like the easiest fighting style. You know, you really don't have to be a master to be good at.
And that doesn't take away from it, because there is certain levels of skill to that too.
Oh, definitely there is. But like after 2 or 3 games, you could be a very competent sword and board fighter, and you know, hold your own against, you know, other fighting styles, and you know, feel confident. Like, wow, I'm kind of a badass here. You know, I'm getting good with this fighting style. I feel like it has a really good learning curve for new players. Personally, that's what I started off with, and that's what I see a lot of other new players start out with. Now, as far as latex versus boffer versus foam, I really feel like the factors that are included in that is how confident are you in your boffers. If you made boffers and have them tested, and your method is good, and I would say go with the boffer because it's safer to use and overall. If they're okay, but the problem is if you're not good with your method of boffers and you're trying them out for the first time, you could hurt somebody if your boffer isn't safe, and your PVC slides to the end, you accidentally poke someone with PVC. That could be a real problem. So if you're not confident with your boffer method, like have a friend do it, or have staff double check your weapon, make sure it's okay. And the next is, when LARPing doesn't have the typical speed of actual combat. Obviously we're role playing, and if you use a foam weapon, they're pretty sturdy. They're pretty, they can hit pretty hard. And if you swing a little bit too hard, you could hurt somebody. Even through armor or hit them in the face, you could do some damage. And if you know that, like, man, like I get too passionate and enthralled with the combat, and like sometimes I go too full tilt, you could hurt somebody. And sometimes a boffer is better for that because they have more of a cushion. So that's another thing to take into account.
As Jake likes to often interrupt Avi, weather is a factor in this. If it's winter, foam weapons might not be the best. latex and foam weapons tend to freeze up and harden and can really leave a sting even with like a light swing. It's keeping your weapons warm, but boffer in the winter, in the cold, can generally still be pretty safe. But latex and foam weapons freeze up and get really hard.
That's a really good point, Tyler. That those types of weapons, they have the more, and not only just from the elements, like from being cold, but also like just the general wear and tear. They're more expensive to buy, foam and latex. That's more money out of pocket for something a new hobby you're just trying out. That's another factor that you have to think about. And then some people like sealant on their weapons and wipe them down. Or
the maintenance aspect
can be a lot
someone
for a new player. So if I was going to have to give a recommendation between the three right now, I would say go with boffer. Go with a boffer weapon. It's something you could build relatively cheap. It's a good skill to develop if you're going to be a part of the LARP community in the future. Everyone should learn how to make a boffer weapon. So that's what I'd have to go with.
Tyler, do you have any other comments on that subject as far as where to start with that weaponry?
Personally, like Jake said, sword and shield and your typical sort of warrior fighting style is often the easiest to get into. You're not a one-hit drop. You often have a bit of more durability, and for a lot of new players, it sort of is a play style that you'd like. Obviously, no one wants to just get hit and killed in every single encounter, and being sword and shield can sort of offer you the durability to not have that happen. But personally, I like to find starting out a more lighter role, sort of a skirmishing, dual-wielding role. It offers you a bit more speed, and you can often avoid getting sort of bogged down in a one-on-one fight where you're relying purely on skill and what's often referred to as numbers. You're not relying on your hit points. You're not relying on your damage output. You're able to sort of use your speed and sort of dexterity to your advantage by not getting into direct fights. But at the same time, being able to join in combat and sort of helping out someone who's fighting one-on-one in a duel, and you jump in from behind, they're not going to see it coming. They're not going to be able to hit you but by the time you leave.
No, that makes sense. I think that in my career, I've kind of run the gamut, except for I haven't done like serious LARP archery. That's probably the one fighting style I've never really tried to do, nor do I really think I'll get into it. I'll probably always just throw packets with a bow fizz rep as opposed to actually getting boffer arrows, because one, they're super expensive and I don't want to break them.
Yeah,
I totally agree with Jake that sword and shield is the best starting point for getting into LARP combat. That's what I started with, and I even went back to. And if you've noticed, there's tons of experienced players that will always go back to using sword and board with characters now and then. But the thing is, I think as you progress in your career, there's nothing stopping you from toying around with other fighting styles and other weapons. I kind of make it a point with every character that I develop is that I want this guy to have a signature fighting style. So first guy was sword and board. The next guy was a bastard sword. The next guy was a sword and board. The next guy after that was two weapons. And now the guy I play currently, he's fighting with a two-handed greatsword. So I think it's a really cool idea to kind of, with your character, to make your fighting style your signature as well. So like get super good at that fighting style, and eventually you'll be known for it, and people will realize, wow, that guy, you know what? He's a great shield fighter. I want him on the shield line next to me, because I fight with a two-handed weapon. I need someone to cover my flank while I'm fighting. So it's a great way to become involved just based on what you came to game with.
And to add on, if you are not just one new player going to a game, you're a group of new players going to a game, one of the greatest things to see is when a group of new players comes to our game and we just see them all rolling up with shields and swords, and then half of them using polearms or longer weapons and using actual formations to fight.
It's pretty bad.
Exciting to see a fighting formation on the field, making up for the fact that you might be low level and low health, but you're using tactics and numbers to just overwhelm whatever enemy you're fighting.
That is awesome. I love
Yep.
people actually using proper historically proven tactics and stuff like that in game, and you recognize it for what it is.
Well, I think we're all harping back to what we were said originally, man. Like research, and that just because you don't have to just research the game, like research what you want to do. Like if I want to be a sword and shield fighter, like research like how do actually people actually fight with their sword and shield? Like what was the actual like combat that they used to do? And of course you have to modify for LARPing because we're not actually
We're not going to ram our shields into
yeah,
people.
we're not actually killing it. But like it's cool to, and then you can talk to other people in game about it. Like, yeah, I kind of like did the research and I found out that my circular shield is used more for this. It's not like a kite shield or not like a Roman type shield. You really get to talk to people more about like another aspect of LARPing. There's so many parts of this hobby that can be so deep and interesting that you can always find something. I guarantee you'll find something about LARPing that you'll really like. It can be the combat, it could be the lore, it could be the crafting, it could be the costuming setup, it could just be the makeup. Like there's so many different parts about this that I think someone has to like some of it.
No, you're 100% correct. And I think we're kind of getting near the close of the whole conversation as far as talking about becoming coming to a new player as LARP. Now I want to field it to you guys if there's anything that you think you want to bring up before I pose the final finale question. Which is more of like a fun thing.
Yeah, come to Frontier Dawn. It's an awesome game.
Okay, this is shameless plug time now.
Yeah, right. No, but seriously, I just say come to Frontier Dawn. It's a great game, but just come out and try LARPing. Like I as a guy that I never thought I would like LARPing. And then my brother was really into it. He told me about it, and I'm like, all right, I'll try it.
I was very often mocked because I came home wearing parts of my costuming and makeup, and I know for a fact my brother was like, what the hell is he doing with this makeup and his costuming? Then he came to one event, and it obviously had a profound impact on him, and actually kind of changed the course of his life if you really think about it.
Yeah, maybe. But I would definitely say that LARPing is a hobby that I got a lot more out of it than I ever expected to. And I think anyone who puts himself into the hobby will feel the same way. So I would say if you're thinking about trying out LARPing, give it a try. It's all it is one weekend. If you don't like it, hey man, how many things do you try and not like, in your lifetime?
Just don't try drugs.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
If I was to say one thing, bring your friends, You don't have to do it alone. And some of the funnest things to do is to just come in as a group of friends. Come in together. You have people you're going to be a lot more comfortable that way. And you might even just say you're just having a dull moment and you don't want to go talk to strangers. You can just talk with your friends and sort of immerse yourself in the world that way. And then slowly a lot of people are going to want to come and join you. And it can make things a lot more smoother for you. You're not going to be as anxious because you're with no one you know. You're going to have people you always know with you, and you can always rely on that.
Okay. And of course, I want to do a shameless plug myself for Chronicles of Roanoke, which is based in Barnegat, New Jersey, which is it's a month it's a LARP that runs every 2 months. So it's very manageable to actually make it out to events. And then the last thing I want to ask, which is kind of a fun thing, is I want to know if either of you guys have any cool or neat character concepts that you've thought of recently or kind of been sticking in your mind that you would love to see implemented, whether someone else plays them or you yourselves play them.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one that I'm working on right now.
Well, first off, is it a spoiler for the game?
It definitely is a spoiler. So I'll take a different one.
So let me stop you right there.
I really, not a concept, but like, I actually, our last event, we finished up a bad guy race that me and a buddy of mine, Josh Yoder, kind of like we came up with this idea of we want to have these like evil corpse doctors, and it developed into this crazy thing that through like just us brainstorming, and it was this whole evil race of cannibalistic tribe that basically like they started taking parts of other people and like putting it into themselves to like live longer, and they worship like the dark gods, and they're like really like primal and like evil, and like just basically there's no redeemable quality about these people. And I took a lot of inspiration from the 13th Warrior, the tribe that they fought.
The Wendo,
yes. They're very based on them a lot too, with the way their mannerisms are. And it was just so cool that our last event, they kind of defeat their chieftain. And I loved how like, wow, like I never did that before. Like it's cool to create a character, but to create this whole race of evil enemies and have the players be like, yeah, we got them, we took these guys down. Like I love that I made people that were so evil and sinister that they were like happy they took them down, like bragging about killing like their leader and stuff. So as far as like like that was a really fun creative project to create this this kind of like melting pot of all these different influences to create this evil bad guy race that the players got to defeat. I really love that.
Okay, that's super cool. I'm glad to see that you guys at the time you thought something out, you implemented it, and then it was for the betterment of your game. Tyler, do you have any kind of like cool concepts that you would love to see implemented by yourself?
Yeah, I've always sort of wanted to play a character who's sort of like a shamanistically faith healing divine magic user, but I've never actually really gotten the chance to, and kind of really would love to at some point play one. I'm still throwing ideas around, looking at what game would I play it at, what rule set would I use, how would I approach it, and I really think I really want to go for more of the sort of shamanistic-y, almost like a monk sort of, but more, faith healy, less monk as in fisticuffs, more monk as in like traveling preacher, traveling scholar, but more very sort of rough shaman style, tribal, very occult.
Okay. Real quick, as we're talking, I really want to almost. I know what you're asked, but I almost want to bring back a character.
What's that?
And Tyler's brought him up, the Kung Fu monk that I used to play. He was like, I love the character because he was so nice, and he was like the nicest. Like I felt good playing.
You were disgustingly nice.
It was, yeah, and it gave me such a good feeling because like no matter what we were doing, I would always do the hardest thing possible if it was the nicest outcome, no matter what. And I loved playing that character so much. And like I remember and he was like my really first character that I built. Like I took the time and the effort, and I thought of his backstory, and like I had amazing RP. It'd be really fun to bring that character back in like a different setting. What about you, Ab?
Well, I right now I kind of have like two ideas, and the thing is that I kind of have I base a lot of things off the archetype and specific characters from media, and then I'll always tweak them to suit the game and my own personal leanings. So one I have is, if you're familiar with the concept of a character named Kashern. So he's a man who was a human being who became an android in the anime, and I just like the concept of a guy who transcends his humanity and becomes one with machinery. And what he does is he fights for humanity, but he has this dichotomy. He's like, am I machine? Am I human? Do people still like me because I am the way I am? And so that's something that it's a real personal struggle that character has to deal with. So I'd love to do something like that. And of course, but the thing is, I also think when I think of these concepts, I'm also thinking of, I'm currently playing this game, so I know the concept I'm thinking of right now will translate well into that game. So that's the one concept, playing like an android character who loves to fucking rip machines apart with his bare hands. Watch the anime and you'll see it's awesome. And then the other one I've been thinking of is doing a lot of comic book research and reading some comics. I would love to play a character who's very similar to Doctor Doom. So a guy who is like supreme intelligence and has a grasp on black magic, but is so intelligent that he also uses technology. So he's this incredible blend of magic and technology where it's become completely indistinguishable.
Like Arcana Tech, basically.
Yeah, he's basically an Arcana Tech, I guess is the best term for it. And that would fit totally well within the realm of Chronicles of Roanoke, because that actually is, class features blending magic and technology. But the thing is, like, in doing my research on the character, he's so intelligent that he believes he's above humanity, but recognizes that he has the same foibles as a regular person. And sure, he's supremely evil, but he's also very honorable. He'll never break a promise that he makes. He'll try and do what is the best for his universe. Of course, he'll want to make sure he benefits the most, but if it's going to protect the planet, he'll do it because he's got to rule the planet. He still needs a planet, and just the way he gets things done, I just really like that whole shtick that he is going. And I'm sure I'll think of a new one tomorrow.
Yeah, we always come
And
up with
never,
new ideas.
yeah, it's like that character would be cool. I'd like the way that class feature.
Oh yeah, dude. I'll see like a spider in its web, and I'm like, what if I could be like?
What if I was a spider?
What if I was some sort of like man spider, like Arachno boy?
Oh man, I love that character my friend's playing. I wanna be with him there, being like a raging berserker.
Yeah, that's it too. Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's the wrap up for our very first episode of Hall of Tales. I think it was we talked a lot.
We did talk a lot. Never shut up, man.
Yeah, we talked a lot. I'm hoping that we give some really good advice to people that are considering LARPing for the first time, getting involved as new players. And of course, you know what? This is only our perspectives and all the only things that we had to impart. So you're going to take away from this whatever it is you take away. Though I do hope you take away something and it helps you in your future endeavors as a LARPer, or makes you want to LARP for the first time. But yeah, look forward to more podcasts from Hall of Tales about various different topics, talking about all kinds of stuff, talking about lore, talking about religion, all kinds of cool shit. So look forward to that coming to you in the future. So let's all sign off. This has been Avi.
This has been Jacob.
And this has been Tyler.
Take care. See you soon.